Today, we're joined by my good friend and business advisor, Richard Bell, and he's going to share his journey of business advisory and most recently being the CEO of Little Zach's Academy and how he's grown the brand by 10 times over the past 6 years. I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Rich.
Yeah, thank you. It's taken a little while to pull this together, but finally we're here.
It has, mate. Third time lucky. Good things happen in threes.
They do. No, it's a pleasure, mate, and I'm looking forward to having a good chat today.
Absolutely. Well, we've been acquainted and friends for almost a decade now.
Yeah, nearly. And I was thinking about that the other day. It's been nearly 10 years since we met at Carb all those years ago.
Yeah.
It's been a good journey.
It has been, and we've sort of been on, I guess, a journey, and you've helped me with my business in the advisory space, and you're actually my first business advisor.
Okay,
so
wow.
It really got me sort of exposed to the importance of having someone like yourself, to really help what we're doing as a business. But since then, I've seen you grow. You've been involved in a few businesses over time. Obviously, you helped the Entourage back in the day with Jack Delosa. You also had Business Leadz, which is your advisory firm, and now you're CEO of Little Zach's Academy.
Yes.
Over the past 6 years, and you've 10x'd it. You've got hundreds of staff. Doing some great things. Really keen to sort of hear that story and how it's all going. So let's start with that.
Yeah, happy. Well, I mean, like you said, it's been a journey over the last 15 years. There was the Entourage and of course Fitstop, which was a chain of gyms. We built them up. I co-founded that in 2016. Built them up. When I exited, I think we had 68 or 69 locations around Australia and hadn't launched in the US yet. And sold out my equity stake to a private equity-backed firm called Lift Brands. And Fitstop have gone on to do some great stuff. They've got 160 locations now, I think, launched in the US. So, and Little Zach's came along. So I was sitting on their advisory board, and at that time, they were operating 6 early learning centres, but I fell in love with what they stood for as a brand and the delivery of their product and ultimately what they were doing for young children. I've got 3 kids myself, as you know. I remember walking into my first Little Zach's and, these guys are, they're learning French, they're doing cooking lessons, they're doing yoga and meditation, during their time. We're taking them to swimming lessons. And I thought, wow, what an awesome opportunity to come in and apply my commercial and entrepreneurial skill set, to be able to blow this business up and deliver that to more families across Australia. And really happy to say that in that 5-year period, we have 10x. So we're at 50 centres now, around about 1,800 staff, and we're looking to expand more. We've got another 30 centres under construction. We launch into Queensland in July, and then South Australia in August as well. So it's been a big role now. It's really turned into that, mature business that's still achieving 20-30% growth year on year. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch because it's very easy to get stuck in certain things, right, and not know when to pull out of things. And I think one thing that you took us through with your advisory approach was finding those opportunities and knowing when to exit or at least find another opportunity after that. And I feel you've been a master at doing that. So how over the those awesome businesses you've worked in, how do you know when to go in and when to exit?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, I always say that I'm not the guy who's probably going to come up with the idea. So knowing who you are, first of all, is really important. For me, my sweet spot is really between that, CEO and investor, lane. I'm not the guy who's going to sit at home and dream up the idea for what the new product or service will be. But if there's just a seed there of what that product or service could be, I'm definitely the guy that will accelerate it, from a growth standpoint. So knowing where you play is really important. And I think a lot of business people and entrepreneurs get stuck not knowing where they play. And they, get investors at the wrong time, or they fail to hire a CEO to scale, or they don't get an advisory board around them.
We'll get too emotional with it as well.
Of course. So, really knowing what seat you sit on is number one. Will I be that steady CEO that runs it? If it's listed on the exchange and it's $1 billion company, probably not. I like to know where I start, where I exit, and where my sweet spot is. And I think that's important to understand what stage you sit at. And the last thing I'd say there's two sorts of companies. One is a growth company that is deliberately geared for growth. And the second thing there is a more static business that is going to sort of tick along 5 to 10% growth every year. And that requires a completely different mentality, operating rhythm, and leader, to be able to take it to that next stage.
Yeah.
I think for me, I just know what I'm really good at. And I also know when, hey, I've done my gig here. It's where it needs to be. Let's either now exit, sell, bring in another leader, or move on to the next project.
Yeah, super interesting because there is different stages of business, right? You've got the idea stage, startup stage, growth stage, exit stage. So knowing where you play in that and not thinking that you're going to, one model or your skill set is aligned to everything, because it requires a completely different team, a completely different skill set, processes, systems, etc. You were very, you highlighted that very well, with some of the advisory you've done with us. What works within sort of 0 to 1 mil is going to be very different to 1 to 10. It's going to be very different to 10 to 100. So when you're going through, all of your due diligence with businesses, what are some of the things that are just red flags that you won't go into?
I think the first thing for me personally is I have to go into something that I absolutely believe in. And I think we've chatted about that a lot. I can't go into a business that is only commercial. The product or the service I have to be connected to in some way. And I think that's probably true for most people. And I would encourage, founders or CEOs to ask themselves that question, like, do I really enjoy what I do? So I would never go into something where I wasn't connected to it emotionally. Number two, I look at the macroeconomics of a sector, and I look at, is this sector growing kind of in Australia, globally? What's been the predicted market size, now 5 years, 10 years, and is that market getting, as an example, bipartisan support from a government perspective, either through funding or through policy? What sort of talent is in that sector? Are there great leaders, entrepreneurs, investors investing into that sector right now? And then I'm always looking at, well, what's the consumer doing? And in our case, that is, do parents right now care about, where their child ends up when they start school? I would say that is a massive yes.
For sure.
And more so than ever. And so there is a lot of due diligence before I go into any company. I look at it almost like if I'm a PE firm, I'm assessing that company on a case-by-case basis to go, well, if I invested, and which I do all the time, my own money into this and I started it, would I be happy to keep investing over the next 5 to 10 years? And I think anecdotally, when you're around the business world as we are all the time, what's trending, what's not, what's, kind of had its time, and then it's probably going to, fizzle away. So it's important to look at those opportunities, both from a personal career perspective, but, from a commercial perspective as well. I'm a huge fan of, if you've got an investment or a business and it's not growing, at some stage you need to move on to the next thing. And you need to go, what, the most valuable asset I have is time.
Yep.
And I think that sweet spot of time is between like 30 and 45. Not that you can't grow a business after that, but I just think that's probably where you've got the most energy, conviction, and you can really give it the work that it requires.
For sure.
Yeah.
And comfort's the enemy of growth, right? And I definitely get a little bit anxious and uncomfortable if I'm feeling like I'm doing stuff all the time, over and over again. It's the same. It's like expecting a different result, but doing the same thing, definition of insanity almost.
Yeah, of course.
The growth of Little Zacks has been quite phenomenal, not to say that childcare centres are, there's such a need in society. There's always, new kids growing up, and there's going to be a constant replenishment of clients to work with there. But what sort of things do you implement straight away, and like how's that journey of growth been? Like, what's some of the strategies that you've done without giving too much away?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and look, I talk about this a lot in different interviews or leadership meetings, or when I'm speaking. And the first thing is that every business is 80% the same. And what I mean by that is every business has leadership, sales, marketing, finance, capital tables, bank accounts, P&Ls, marketing plans, growth strategies. Every business involves people. The nuance there is the 20% of product or service that might be changed. So, that might be, you could be a coffee business, you could be a digital marketing company, a childcare company, a gym. That 20% nuance is the only thing that changes. So for me, when I go into a business, I'm looking at the other 80% fundamentals of the company to start with. So the first thing I'm assessing is, what are the leaders like in the business? What's the financial viability of the business? Do we have enough growth capital to be able to grow? Where does our brand sit in the market? What is our lead generation like? Those real fundamentals of the organization. Are we profitable? What are our growth rates? Once I've figured that out, I'll then go into trying to become a subject matter expert in that field. So, 5-6 years ago, I knew nothing about, early education. However, now I would say that I'm an absolute expert in that field, from, government policy to opening centres to, DAs, buildings, leasing, construction finance, all of those things, because I've made it my business as the CEO of the company to know every little detail about the sector. I've become obsessed with that sector. The third thing I'm always looking at is, what platform are we building for growth? And what I mean by platform is, do we have the right softwares, operational infrastructure, systems, processes, people to hold growth? Because so many companies explode and then end up falling over. So I'm always looking at, is there a platform here? If I got, 100 million in sales or customers tomorrow, could I handle that growth? And then it's about managing what I call the accelerator and the brake through that journey. Grow, operationally backfill, grow, operationally backfill. And then, lastly, I think every CEO or founder has to obsess about the intersection of what happens with the consumer and their product, because it's really easy to grow. It's really hard to stay at that level of growth. Totally. So it's, for me, I obsessed about what education does that child get between the educator and the child and the family. We educate nearly 10,000 families a week now. Wow. But I still obsess about the one child, the one educator, and that parent and that family. And are they getting what we say they get? Does the theory of my company match what that consumer gets? And I'm constantly obsessing about that and tweaking that. And that's what we've done, through our growth journey. And, of course, you then have a whole bunch of luck that comes along. I believe that there's definitely timing for sure. For everything. Hiring great talent is a huge focus of mine, and making that talent better. I've got a team of 8 executives that, report to me now in running the business. And, as an example, when I was looking for a CFO, I was like, right, who do I believe is going to be one of the best CFOs that I could find in the country? And I'm like, well, why don't I just find someone who's worked in, M&A at Macquarie Bank? Right? And that's who my CFO is now. Awesome. 10 years at Macquarie, 6 years at Macquarie in New York. So it's finding talent around you as well who are better than you, who can also elevate those things. Yeah,
that's great. Phenomenal. Let's talk about brand, because Little Zacks, the growth of it, getting into that many locations and then being able to pull new customers into that, reaching out to parents, getting their kids in there, finding staff. Like, I'm sure there's a system involved in that. It's not something that is, I guess, as actively a marketing engine. We talked a little bit about, your personal brand and sort of being the advocate of Little Zacks. And I've seen you on some, media channels and, presenting to some live TV segments and stuff on Little Zacks when certain industry trends come up. But how do you balance, an engine like that without necessarily doing a lot of marketing? Like, what is the marketing strategy for Little Zacks, and how do you sort of implement that with your brand too?
Yeah, sure. Well, like I said right at the start, I think any business they have commercial fundamentals, right? So yes, we're in the early childhood sector, and it's about education of children, but we're also a commercial business that has a marketing team, that has an enrollments team, but I will always say that number one, your product has to be good. And all customers, but in particularly parents, they talk a lot. There's Facebook groups, there's mum groups. And,
so true.
So getting your product or your service absolutely nailed is number one. That will always be your best word of mouth. And whether you're a tech company, whether you're a gym, whether you're a digital marketing service or an accounting firm, your product, your service, what the customer thinks of you is absolutely number one. That'll create more word of mouth than any marketing engine will ever create. But then specifically from a marketing perspective, in the sector I operate in, there's got to be high trust. So we've invested a lot in brand, making sure that our masthead as a brand, our masthead campaigns, that trust is high. So, more specifically, things like Google reviews and making sure that, we've got something like 1,200 Google reviews across the business. So making sure that, parents are being advocates for us at a masthead brand level. We've had to do a couple of larger deals this year, like we're a marquee partner of the Western Sydney Wanderers. So getting your brand out there in mainstream, so people start to recognize that, and they see that, Little Zacks is a real player, and they're here to stay, and they're a bigger business, and I trust that. All the way down to little local community partnerships. So yes, we're a large organization, but across our 50 locations, every single one of those locations has local strategic partnerships. Could be with a local cafe, could be with a local school. I remember one partnership we did with the mechanic company that fitted all of the car seats into every single car that had car seats installed. So every time their car seat was installed, they'd get a Little Zacks free tour voucher. So there's all of these strategic things that happen in any business, regardless of the sector. But it's about layering that, starting at masthead, looking all the way down to that local level. And then, of course, you've got digital spend in there, paid ad spend. It's a competitive sector, so we're spending a lot in ad spend. But all of that is irrelevant if you can't deliver.
That's right.
On your product or your service.
Yeah. And you, what you're talking about essentially is building credibility and trust around the brand.
Yes.
Which I'm such an advocate of. That is, I think, the most crucial thing in a business to have before you start going crazy with marketing and spending money online, because people just don't trust anything these days. So the fact that you've got, the Google reviews, which is, if you've got bad reviews, people aren't going to put their kids in there, right?
Yeah, of course.
And building those trusted collaborations and partnerships. Like, I know partnerships is one thing that I remember you just cementing so much with even what we do in business. And, we've gone over the past few years of really building up our partnership network, which has allowed us to have this next evolution of growth, which is combining that, growth by collaboration play that we're doing as a business. But talk to me about how crucial partnerships have been for Little Zacks and everything you've done.
Yeah, partnerships are really important, because ultimately what you're doing with a partnership from a strategic perspective is you're saying, hey, we align really nicely. We've got the same consumer, but we don't compete. As an example, the Western Sydney Wanderers, I'll just talk through that collaboration, because it's really cool. So we do a program inside of every single Little Zacks centre twice a week called Zackaroos, which is where professional soccer coaches come in and take our children through soccer lessons. So they're learning, they're learning the building blocks of, dribbling and kicking a goal, and they're learning those fundamentals of what they need to learn. So the partnership with the Western Sydney Wanderers, given that we've got 23 centres in the Western Sydney region, and then another 8 opening up in that region, that's like 50 to 60% of our penetration. So
wow.
Partnering with the Western Sydney Wanderers to then connect that to Zackaroos. And the tagline there was from Zackaroos to Western Sydney Wanderers.
Yeah,
so connecting that if your child comes to Little Zach's Academy, there's a possibility that they will be connected to the Western Sydney Wanderers. And then there was a whole bunch of mechanics under that, which was, that every child inside of Little Zach's Academy got a free membership to the Western Sydney Wanderers. We ran a little five-a-side competition, centre versus centre, at the Western Sydney Wanderers Park, so that the little kids were competing in like a mini cup and a mini tournament.
Oh, cool.
And that was underpinned with our charity partners as well. So Western Sydney have a marquee player called Yuan Mate, who's a World Cup player. He was signed this year with them, and he has a charity that he'd like to support. So we did a whole bunch of live TV segments which tied in charity partnerships, Zackaroos, Western Sydney Wanderers, and children and families being a part of that. They've got a huge database in the Western Sydney area. We have a huge database in the Western Sydney area. I did an exercise to see what percentage of crossover that database was before the deal was signed, and it wasn't a high percentage.
Right.
So it's all these mechanics that I'll look at whenever I'm doing a partnership, from community engagement, value to the children, value to the consumer, value to the business I'm partnering with. And then I give it, I guess, the pub test. Does this make, commercial sense? Does it make holistic sense? Does it fit right? And is there strong alignment? And then there's obviously some cool stuff where, you see your brand around the entire of a core stadium when you've got 30, 40,000 people there watching a derby between Sydney FC and Western Sydney Wanderers. There's that creates massive hype and momentum both in your staff and in families as well. So that's been a marquee for us this year. Now, when I started 5 years ago and we had 5 centres, the partnerships didn't look like that.
Yeah.
But the fundamentals have been the same the entire way through.
Yeah. I can sort of relate to it. Like I said, in your timeline of that 5 to 7 year period, we're exactly at that cusp of that sort of 7-8 year period as a business and looking for ways to grow. And, you've guided us through the process back in the day, and we're working with an advisor, M&A, ex-agency. So he's helping us sort of delve into this partnership network that we've built. That's our IP that a lot of people don't realize that I've personally built over time through, really going hard on partnerships, aligning ourselves with key people,
Sure.
In marketing. So splintered, you've got so many different roles: website, tech, automation, copywriting, production, the list goes on, right? So we're taking that one step further, building an ecosystem, and then growth by collaboration is essentially the strategy, rather than a complete marriage and share of equity. It's basically just going in JVing and then building an ecosystem and sharing resources to tackle business in a bigger way. But the one thing he said to me before you even start, thinking of taking a partnership or a collaboration to the next step is chemistry number 1, chemistry number 2.
Yeah.
And chemistry number 3.
Yeah.
Because if you're not getting along as a synergistic sort of partnership, if you're butting heads or you've got 2 key players fighting, with each other, and then the rest of it will just fall over.
Yeah, of course. And, if I look back to the Western Sydney Wanderers partnership that we did, that made a lot of holistic sense on paper. But I reckon I spent 12 months getting to know the CEO of the Western Sydney Wanderers, and he spent 12 months getting to know me, right? Because you've got 2 really high credible brands, high trust in the market, and both have spent a lot of money and a lot of time and many years building up brand equity. So to partner with the wrong company or the wrong person can really quickly undo that. So, Scott and I spent a lot of time getting to know each other and really talking about what we value, what matters, why we're doing this, what's important, what's the benefit to his community, what's the benefit to the Little Zach's community. And I would encourage any business owner or anyone in marketing, when they're doing partnerships, to go through those conversations. It's never just about the commercials that are written in a contract.
No.
It's always about the relationship, the values, the alignment, the integrity behind it, and what are you trying to get from it. I have a theory that I want any deal that I do in business, whether it's partnership or a deal, there needs to be a win-win-win.
Yeah.
It's got to be a win for you, a win for the other person on the other end, and a win for the consumer.
So true.
Any other formula, I think you have someone leaving, with a distaste in their mouth. And over time, that will never work.
100%. And that's the essence of culture. I think people might look at culture as an internal thing, but it's external as well. Like you could have really poor clients, but a good internal team, but it's going to piss your internal team off because you've let bad clients in.
Of course.
And vice versa. You might have really great clients, but if you built the wrong team, you won't be able to service them correctly.
Yes.
And it comes from the top up as well. Bad management, good team, good clients, still won't work. So I think you're dead right. That's a great way to look at it, that three-way split.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that in business, if you do that, and you know that you're operating in a I guess a realm of 30, 40 years, that's the way I look at things now. Not, hey, I'm in this for 3 years to make money and get out.
Yeah.
If you think 30, 40 years, where am I going to be? Where is this business going to be? Where's the brand? Where's the reputation? Normally that will give you a good read on whether you should be doing deals or not.
For sure. And then how does this partnership build value with my customers, and how does this partnership build value with the growth of the business to service more potential customers? So I think that's a one missing element as well. If the partnership's not there to make more money, it's there to build more value with your customers, which in turn will make money.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. And look, we, in relation to that partnership, without spending too much time on it, but when we announced that to families, to staff, to our other partners, everyone was genuinely excited about it.
Cool.
Everyone was super pumped on it. And that's because we really took the time to form the appropriate partnership, go through those things. Yeah,
that's awesome. Now, without growth, with growth, there's a thing called adversity. I think everyone goes through it. There's challenges, it's all good to paint the pretty pictures and, say that success comes easy, which is complete false. It's very hard. Running any business, I think for that matter, small, big or large, is tough and seems to be getting harder and harder. With certain economic shifts and economic strains, particularly in the Australian economy. How do you navigate challenges, or what's been sort of the biggest adversities you've sort of hit over the past few years?
Well, there's been a lot. Let's start with COVID.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it too much, but we were the first early learning centre to have a child COVID case. So I can remember arriving at the office one morning and Channel 9 were there with a camera in my face, and
I remember that.
Yeah. And
remember your mug on TV?
Yeah, thank you, mate. Thank you. And I think we had something like 35 media calls that day to the office. So, there's things like that where you're like, are we still going to be here in a year? Because we're closing centres. People are going in there in hazmat suits to do deep cleans. I think we ended up closing, something like 35 times over that COVID period. Like close, reopen, get the clearance, and then let everyone back in. So that was definitely a challenging period. Some other challenging periods. I think when you go through growth, you've got to make decisions as a leader that are best for the greater good, and often that can be hard because the best decisions are often made when it's hard to make them. In fact, the best decisions are made when it's really inconvenient to make them. So, when you go through growth, I have a decision-making model on how I make decisions, and that is always the company first. Company number one. If the company's not here, then we might as well pack up and go home. Customer number two. So I want to make sure that everything we're doing is obsessing over the customer. Staff number three, and then partners number four. And some people can be uncomfortable with that, but I'm always really clear to anybody who comes into the business that this company and the long-term trajectory of this company and the health of this company, and that long-term sustainability of this business comes before anything. Because if there is no company, nothing else happens. There's no value, there's no impact. Everything that you've done in the past becomes worthless. So keeping the company strong, healthy, sustainable, and growing is number one. And in order to do that, there are times where you've got to make difficult decisions, and that might be, to let someone go. That might be to, in our case, try and back out of, a commercial deal that we've entered if it no longer makes sense. It might be to have uncomfortable conversations. It might be to, sign a new lease that you've got to grow into. But it's about putting the organization first. And I often say being a great leader is not about being liked. It's about everyone around you asking one question. The person leading this company, do I trust that they are going to take this business to where this business is going? And do I trust the future and the long-term trajectory of this company?
Yeah.
And that's a very different question to, do I like them? Are they nice? Do we get along? And of course, yes, you want people in your organization to like you if you can, but ultimately it's about them trusting you at the helm.
Yes.
It's not about them liking what you do on a Friday night.
I think that can be blurred as well. If they're treating you too much like friends, then, there is that level of respect that can go out the window. So being able to play within those two elements, yes, be friendly, make sure that there isn't any animosity there between, that sort of level of leadership and team, but be able to show that respect and, have to be stern when things get tough.
Of course. And, and then, your customers, right? Like they have to be pleased and happy and loving what you do in order for your company to thrive.
For sure.
So if you have no company and you have no customers, you don't need any stuff. Those decision-making frameworks have held me in good stead through adversity.
Yeah.
Like my role as, the CEO of Little Zacks is to make sure that in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, the company is thriving, it still exists, and it's making the impact that it needs to make.
For sure. And I think adversity teaches us to build resilience. And I feel like there is silver linings all the time when we go through periods of shifts and, challenges. It makes us to think outside the square and seek further help or really double down on something that's becoming a problem to find the solution. So what do you feel has been the biggest breakthrough with Little Zacks in the growth period?
Yeah, sure. Not just Little Zacks, but I think in particular, any business, if you're not getting problems, you're probably not moving fast enough.
Yeah.
You're probably not challenging yourself. There is no business that is easy and smooth sailing. It just does not exist. So
maybe on Instagram it exists, in TikTok.
Sure.
But no, definitely not.
Yeah, but I think in any organization, when you're finding problems and you're solving problems, at the time it might seem like adversity. But the only way to be able to get through those problems is to be able to solve it. It's not going to fix itself. So really fronting up as a leader and as an entrepreneur and solving the real problems in your business will always hold you in good stead. And if we don't face adversity, then we never know what good looks like because we're always chasing this feel-good emotion that sometimes we attach to business and to entrepreneurship, when the reality of it is, yes, there's passion there and there's enjoyment there, but that's not about being happy every day, having no adversity, no problems. In fact, it's the opposite. You can have the worst day that you've had, and you can feel like you are absolutely, completely in line with your purpose and where you should be. So I often get frustrated when I guess you see those things on Instagram or TikTok and everything's great and my business is so great and life's so great. And whilst that might be true, I don't think it paints a realistic picture of what it's like to be an entrepreneur, to be a business person, and to achieve, any level of success. Anyone who I've ever spoken with who is ultimately successful in business, most of it's been hard.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, again, I can resonate that with a lot. We're still, in that sort of growth period and it's tough, and we're in a very saturated market. So there is times where you have to really go, cool, like how do we be different? How do we separate ourselves? And with that becomes growth. And those who don't put their hand up and seek that sort of assistance, because I don't think business should be done alone. I think there is a huge lesson that we need to be able to build up our network. We really need to be able to lean in on people. And when you're getting to periods of stagnation or you're hitting a ceiling and you don't know where to go from there, there's people who've done it before.
Sure.
There's so many people out there that are happy to help. There's so much resources are at the tip of our fingertips now. It's never been easier to create a business.
Of course.
But it's also never been harder.
Yeah. It's interesting. I always say to my team, look less for the shiny, the fun, the distracting things, and look more for the work, the challenging things, and the things that are truly going to give you the satisfaction that you want in your career and your business. In my experience, when you look at those things and you really try and uncover the challenges in your business, the real problems, and you look for opportunities to do the basic, sometimes boring, and fundamental work, that is when your business will grow. And as well, once you've gotten the growth, it's important that you don't stop doing that.
Yeah.
For me, I've never been across any business to the level of detail that I'm across, Little Zach's. Like, it is so operationally heavy. And there's this notion out there, I think, for entrepreneurs and business people that, once you grow, you're not across the detail anymore. Someone else does that stuff. You just lead and network and do all those things. I would give the opposite advice now. Like, I am across the detail to the fact where, I have a tool called the CEO scorecard.
Okay.
And I look at that every Monday morning for 3 hours. I'm in the office at 6 a.m. And every single center I'm looking at, where's our revenue? Where's our staff happiness? Where's our parent happiness? Do we have any debts associated with that center? Where's our occupancy? Who's the center manager there? Is there a traffic light system on them? Do they need to be managed out, etc.? And I'm looking at what were the wages for the prior week of that center with, trend lines, percentages up and down, so that if there's ever a question that, someone asks me about the organization, or there's, something that comes up in a meeting, or I'm meeting with investors or whatever, I'm across the detail. And I think it's impossible to run any business unless you're across the detail. And I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, and that's fundamentally systems, right?
Yeah.
I think building a business, yes, we've talked about team and culture being a pivotal thing and having the right people around you to build that. But, talent doesn't necessarily build and grow a business. It's the systems that will then allow the talent to use to grow the business.
Yeah.
And I think without that systems and, being able to sort of, again, within a multi-scaled, lots of location business model, if you don't have that bird's eye view on what's going on in that red light, that traffic system, very hard for you to check into 50 locations, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. And I think you said something there which I absolutely agree with, which is that, you've got to be able to have the systems and the infrastructure and the operational rhythm in place. Plenty of entrepreneurs can, come up with a great idea. But if that idea is not backed up, with an operating rhythm, with the right systems, with the right softwares in place, with the right scorecards, all of those things that need to happen in a larger scale business or even a smaller business, then it's going to fall over for sure. And then you also have lack of data to be able to make decisions.
Yeah, that's a massive one.
Nothing coming up to you, so you don't know what call to be able to make. So it's never about the person. It's about, I always say that fundamentally businesses are built on systems, infrastructure, and processes. They're not built on people. People come and go. If you build them on, the fundamental architecture of a business, then people can drive that.
Why is the Melbourne Storm so successful? They've made every single final except for 1 year in like 15 years.
But I reckon Manly are going to win the premiership.
You reckon?
Year.
What about Sharkies?
Maybe.
We did good in the trials.
You did do good. But whenever anyone asks me every year, they say, "Rich, who's going to win the premiership?" And my answer is Manly. And I've been waiting since 2012. That's when 2011 actually when we won the last one.
So long it's a Sydney team, then I'm happy. It's all good.
Yes.
So that's great. Like personally, I've seen you've had some shifts as well recently. You're looking very cut, mate. Very fit. What's going on there?
Thank you, mate. We spoke a little bit about it. Like, it's really easy to lose track of kind of personal health. And especially when you're going through, either challenging circumstances in your personal life or, you're working a lot, you're sort of pulling 80-hour weeks, it's easy to lose touch with self. And I think fundamentally every business person goes through small periods with this. But in 2022, I sort of had a hard look at myself, and I looked at my values, and I looked at, what sort of person do I want to be? What sort of father do I want to be? And ultimately, what sort of leader do I want to be? And that definitely starts with you as a person, and I've made some shifts there around, things like sleep patterns, making sure that diet's consistent, making sure that, doing infrareds and cold pools and, training for
massive craze at the moment, isn't it?
it is, training 4 or 5 times a week. And really it's just about prioritizing health.
Yeah.
I think what I've realized is no matter what level of success you get to, if you're not healthy, fit, strong, and your relationships aren't in great shape, what's the point?
Yeah.
Like genuinely,
for sure.
What is the point?
I always think of that. I'm like, I don't know if whenever I'm in the CBD, I look at sort of, guys in suits and they're just overweight. They look miserable. And I'm like, yeah, they're probably in a good job, high paying, but they just look fucked.
Yes.
And I'm like, I would rather trade all that in for health,
yes,
relationships, and a sustainable life.
Totally.
And I think that was neglected a long time ago. And there has been a societal shift, big time, not just with us in our mid-30s or getting a bit older and now having to sort of really focus on that. But I've got quite a young team and, some of my team members, low 20s, are taking massive periods of time off, going out, no drinking. And it has become more acceptable, which is great. I don't think it was as acceptable as a society,
of course,
in Australia.
Yeah, and I mean, like I don't drink. I'm pretty healthy in that way, because I know that to do what we do as business people, like without sounding too extreme, but I kind of view myself as an athlete, right? Like if you want to kind of be a high performing business person and operate at that level where you've got to keep all your balls in the air from, children, health, business, family, well-being, relationships, like you've got to really have systems in place to be able to do that. And one of those fundamental things is your health, and
body like an athlete, mind like a stoic.
Good. I like that. Body like an athlete, mind like a stoic. I think as well, Blake, there's, like I said, when you achieve a certain level of success and you realize that you don't feel any different, you then start to go, okay, it's an inner game.
What's the bigger picture? It's
an inner game. It's not an external game, because the external game, after a while, like I said, it doesn't make a difference to your life. It doesn't really make a difference to how you feel. So, I think focusing on that inner game is important. And I feel blessed that I've realized that at 35, not 65. So yeah, health is definitely a huge priority for me moving forward, and I think will be forever. I learned some good lessons in 22. Yeah,
I did as well, big time post-COVID. I had a shoulder injury as well, which really put me in my tracks, not being able to train. So you get in that sort of like, I guess, rut. And a lot of people do. You get older, you might get injured, or you might have kids, or certain stresses come from business, and then you just push it aside. And it's very hard to regain that momentum.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The crazy thing is, though, is when you're feeling good yourself, you operate better.
And it's an energy thing. I feel like, the law of attraction. Energy attracts. If you're there, you're feeling good, you're emitting that positive energy, naturally you'll feed that back. And it's a weird thing. I always go through this, and I really get to understand, like how that works. And I'm very good on I love reading into like spirituality and how the universe works, universal laws. And even, I'm going through a bit of a detox period right now, and things are just a lot easier. And, better opportunities are landing on my plate. Wouldn't otherwise happen if, I'm not taking care of my health.
Yeah, of course. I think like a challenge I always had was like living in the future. That was a huge, I guess, realization, because I think in doing what we do, where you're always trying to drive and grow and hit the next milestone, especially, when you're driving different businesses, you're thinking, okay, once I get to this mark, I'll be good. Yeah. Once I get to this revenue, this exit, this, this many staff, this house, whatever it is, things will be different. Yeah. And like I said, what I've learned now is from that spiritual side is to focus on now. Like,
fully be present
without sounding too woo-woo. Like all we have is now, and I try and keep it in the day, in that 24-hour period. Because if I could have looked back when I was 20 to know where I am at 35, I would have said, yeah, I'll be fine. I'll retire. I'm really happy. I've achieved what I wanted to achieve, but I still feel like I'm only just getting started. So that goalposts is never going to stop for me. That's just, I think, the nature of an entrepreneur, a business person. I don't know if you feel the same or not.
But absolutely. for sure. Like I've always gone, I need to hit this milestone. Initially in business, it was always like revenue, revenue, like, got to get to this milestone revenue. And then that becomes, okay, that's not the right strategy. Then you start thinking of, okay, what else excites me, building that sustainable culture. But personally, I've had a massive shift similar to yourself. Must be an age thing. We're both 35. About being way more present.
I feel like we should have been brothers at some stage.
Lost at birth. Yeah. Maybe they're twins, mate. Got the hair going and everything.
Yeah, mate, we have.
But yeah, way more present this year for me. And this time around, like I do have lots of periods off where I reset, and sort of detach myself a little bit from the day to day. And definitely, work. I think in any high performance business, you need to have that time off. But, this time around for me, it's becoming way more sustainable. I'm like, I can continue this way rather than before. I would have periods where I would, grind, be healthy, and then it just didn't feel sustainable. So I'd burn out, right? Then you'd go and, celebrate too much. And then you get in that bad habit routine that I was getting myself in. So yeah, I'm a big believer of, the way forward is being present and not having life on fast forward. Have you watched the movie Click with Adam Sandler?
Yes, I have.
Scariest, saddest, but funniest, all in one, all the emotions in one. And,
he's one of my favorite actors.
Oh, and that movie, like, it got me at the end, that movie. But that's like, I think the message in that is, enjoy the journey.
Yeah, of course.
Because, in that movie, he was just wanting to get to that next thing and get that company promotion. And by the end, it's all gone.
Yeah. So mate, wow, now you're making me sad.
I've got plenty of life to live. What do you mean?
Yeah, I know. Or do we?
Yeah, we do, definitely. So I guess over the next few years, I'm sure you've got master plans going back into living the present, but back into the future. What are some of the strategies you guys are looking at for Little Zach's and with this growth plan you've got on? Anything else you're doing personally? Like, what's the next sort of couple of years look like? Because I know you are big on goal setting. Yeah. And goal setting is important to have, right? I know we sort of talk about living in the present, but we do need to set those goals. So we've got a game plan to work with, right?
Yeah, look, I think, ultimately as a CEO, my job is to deliver value in a company. That's value to shareholders, value to customers, value to staff. So that'll continue to be a huge focus. We've got another 30 sites under construction, so that'll take us to 80. I think I'd like to see us sort of hit that 100 mark to really, solidify as, a top 3 player in the country. From an expansion perspective, we'll head into all states. Currently we're only in New South Wales. From a leadership perspective, my leadership over the next 2 to 3 years will need to change. It'll go, less from being, the growth, guy to being able to stabilize the ship, make sure we're delivering absolute value to the consumer all the time, bolstering up the board, looking at what sort of strategic partnerships that we can put in place, to make sure that Little Zach's is here for the next, 20, 30, 40 years. And there's a whole bunch of personal stuff in there as well around, travel and, children.
Where are you going? Where are you traveling?
Well, there's 2 goals I have. One is to climb Mount Everest.
Okay.
Actually climb it, not just base camp.
Yeah, wow.
That's a goal I have. And the other goal I have is to sail around Australia solo.
Right, wow.
By myself. So that's got to happen probably in the next 5, mate.
Not your usual travel destinations.
No.
Wasn't expecting that.
Probably tells you something about my nature.
Yeah, wow, how good.
Yeah, I've just always had a goal to climb Everest.
I mean, Everest is something that you can't just do willy-nilly, right?
No, it'll be a 6 to 12 months sort of process.
Okay.
And then sailing around Australia is just something I've always wanted to do. As a kid, I did a lot of sailing and spent a lot of time on the water and around boats. And I love boats. I love the water. So that's the personal.
And then what's the third? The book release on how you've climbed Everest and sailed around the world whilst maintaining a 6-pack.
I think there will. I think there will be a book at some point, but probably not yet.
Oh, mate, if you tackle those 2, it's a must.
Yeah, business, Everest, and sailing.
I'll be at your book launch.
Okay, mate, thank you.
Now, the importance of having, I call it a SWAT team. I talk about it a lot on these podcasts. Something that David Sawicki, my M&A advisor, termed, I guess, and it just sticks. again, you've had your advisory group, and you sort of stick with that. And I know you sort of we catch up together here and there as well for some lunches and dinners to bring that your sort of inner circle together. And I do feel like this sort of inner circle mentality with a lot of business owners and even people that have sold out of big businesses. I know like Frank Reef, for instance, he's doing that sort of thing at the moment with his inner circle, and Simon Beer's got his inner circle as well with
Culture Kings. Yeah.
One High Club or something.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
that I was looking into, and Cubs just launched their inner circle community as well in Boa. So it seems to be the go, like these micro communities, versus having like an environment where everyone can go into, and it's a bit of a mass market approach. I'm finding that a lot of people are starting to drag their inner circles together, and something that we're focusing on as well, obviously with the agency, is dragging our group of inner circle together. But yeah, talk to me about how you've been able to leverage your inner circle and how you build that SWAT team.
Yeah, good question. I realized many years ago that there's a difference between business networks and acquaintances and inner circle. And I'll explain that I've probably got 5 to 7 people in my life that I trust explicitly. And I think the more you go through business, the more you achieve, the more wealth that you generate. You need to have that absolute trusted inner circle that loves you for you, regardless of who you are, what equity stakes you've got, what car you drive, where you live, like that absolute rock. And that can be, friends, family. That circle is really small, deliberately. So I'm finding I spend a lot of time with that inner circle and having those kind of trusted people around me that will give me real advice, not based on a preloaded intention or assumption that they want to get kind of something from it. The second thing there is I've always sought out mentors. I've always asked business people that are further ahead on the journey than I have, either paid or unpaid. So I spent a lot of time with, there's a guy called Ashik Ahmed, who is the CEO and founder of a tech company called Deputy. They're a rostering company.
Yeah, Deputy.
$1 billion business. He's a great friend of mine. So, we'll spend...
My parents are family friends with Kyle, the Shelleys.
Yes, okay, yeah, Jake and, Jake's his son, actually.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
They sold their Eric.
Shire.
Yeah, they do. Nice house.
Yes, very beautiful.
There's people like that I will sort of sort out and become, I guess, more friends with on a one-on-one basis. I think other people who are doing similar things to you. And what I've found is, finding people who are not going to compete with you is really important. And normally, that's people who don't need to compete with you because they've already built $1 billion business and they're genuinely interested in being able to give back, and you develop a real friendship there. But then from a more business commercial perspective, to your point, there's so many options now. I think groups like YPO, EO, Cub, the Entourage, Boa, like there's so much that you can kind of take from there. And I think that's one thing that maybe 10 or 15 years ago, we didn't have that so much in comparison to now. So I would say, go to those things, be involved in those things. But I would also say, don't become obsessed with being that person that is at all the networking events and you're a part of all these groups and you're doing all these things and you forget to build the business.
You stand out as well. If you're there at every single event and you're trying to win business left, right and center,
yes,
and you're doing it in a way where you're there only to win business, it stands out. You don't want to do that.
Fundamentally, I want to be known for building businesses and building value in businesses. And, even BLG's tagline was let results be the voice.
Yes.
So make it really obvious, not because you have a great brand, not because your social media is awesome, not because you're great at speaking, but have the absolute rock solid result where you can go, I built that company. And that can never be taken away, regardless of brand or, who I know or network or PR. And I think when you do that enough times, that for me is true reputation.
Yeah.
And depth. Someone like a Mark Boris who has just absolute reputation over 20, 30, 40 years of being a business builder.
Absolutely.
That for me is probably more my goal now, rather than to spend so much time networking, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I completely agree with that. There is a premature way to network. And I think if you're going in there without a game plan and you're just going there for no reason, it can become a little bit of a useless exercise. I think there's strategic networking in place, and I think there's a bad way to network.
Yeah, totally.
And I think a part of our philosophy, being a results agency, having to get results for clients, is literally let the results do the talking.
Good.
Yes, we've got to build that trust and relationship initially, and relationships are core and key for that initial arrangement. But without results, it doesn't matter what we say, and that's our philosophy.
Yeah, of course. And, it's just becoming obsessed about, what you do and being obsessed in building that business, but like you said, I agree, relationships are key, and you can't just ignore them. They need to be there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, don't be known as the guy or girl who is at every event.
No.
And then when people say, cool, what business do you have? And you've kind of got a couple of businesses that are not really doing much.
Yeah.
I just don't think it holds a lot of credibility in today's world.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So if you were to start a business tomorrow, because I think there is a lot of people out there wanting to get into business or potentially even looking for their next thing to do. Let's hypothetically say no Little Zacks, no Richard Bell's advisory. You had to start all over again. What would it be?
Great question. And I have thought about it a little bit. Probably three things. Number one, I love health, of course. I think Australia has a massive aging population problem. So something around health prevention in the aged care sector and at-home care.
Yeah, aged care is a big one.
I think that's a huge market coming up. Like I said, people having kind of less and less children compared to what they were doing, say, 30, 40 years ago. We have an aging population, which means, in 10, 15 years, something like 30% of our population is going to be over 65. So, prevention, healthcare, aged care, at-home care is a huge market. The second thing I think is a great kind of space to play in is the wellness space. Whether that is around diet, nutrition, dieting for blood types, really prescribed individual health is a huge sector that is still untouched. When you look at the science that's coming out now around, gut health and skin health and that's combined with the modern lifestyle, the toxins that we take into our body, from a plastic perspective or, from the air quality or whatever it is, a lot of that can be counteracted with, blood testing and, individually tailored plans.
I literally saw on Instagram Simon Beard, speak of him again from Culture Kings. He's literally, it's like getting an oil change. So he's getting all his blood cycled, so to get all the microplastics and any cancer cells out of his system. So I didn't even know it existed. And 6 hour process.
Yep, stem cells
just
is another
cleansing
thing
his
that
blood. Yeah, crazy.
You can get into. So number one, kind of aging population, aged care, if you like. Number two, that real data driven, science driven, individual healthcare around stem cells, nutrition, diet plans for blood types, IVs. I think that's a huge space. That wellness, call it the longevity space. And thirdly, and this is just a fun one, I've always said this, if I retire, I will relax somewhere, and I'd just love to start a coffee shop. On
the top of Everest.
I've always thought just to have a coffee shop that was cool, not a chain, this is just a complete personal goal. One coffee shop, I'm just in there all day chatting with people, working through different investments, making coffee by the beach. But that's a personal goal that, maybe in 15 years time, I'll do that.
And as a coffee enthusiast, that would get your coffee bill down a little bit, wouldn't it?
It would.
How many are you on a day?
I told you at the start, no, I knew you'd ask me this. It's somewhere between 3 and 6, depending on the day.
At what point do you know that's it, enough?
Normally around 6 or 7 o'clock, I won't have another coffee.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I love coffee. I'm not going to give it up. So hopefully,
you need to have your vice.
You've got to have a vice.
Yeah.
I love the energy. It's good for you too. Reduces the risk of heart disease.
That's what they say.
They do say that, and I'm choosing to believe that research.
Yeah, me too. I have my strong double shot in the morning, maybe a third. That's it. not quite 6. But yeah, you got to have something, right?
You have to. You
can't remove everything and starve yourself of fun.
No, I agree. You've got to have a little bit of joy, and I think coffee brings that for me, mate.
For sure. Look, I think the economy at the moment, just before we get to the end, it's been pretty tough. I think for a lot of Australian businesses, small businesses, households,
sure.
Interest rates, and I know that obviously is a huge consideration that you follow from an economic point of view with growing businesses, advising businesses. There is a lot of stress out there, I feel. The sentiment in the market, I think, is getting better. And I think now the interest rates are dropping from an Australian point of view, we'll start moving in the right direction for people to have a little bit of relief. But,
yes.
For those that are struggling out there, because I don't think we really do acknowledge it enough. I think, everyone's trying to explain or show how, great things are, and we look at things from a face level point of view. But for those that are struggling, whether it is on a startup journey or growth to scale journey, what advice would you be giving business owners today?
You make a couple of great points. Number one, I would say don't compare someone else's highlight reel with your behind the scenes. Comparison
is the thief of joy.
Yes, it is. Often what we see on Instagram is, not the case. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say there is a philosophy that I've always lived my life by is that I never try and spend less or control expenditure. And I don't mean in an irresponsible way, but my focus is always how do I generate more? And often we can fall into this mindset, I guess a limiting belief mindset or a scarcity mindset, especially in business around controlling expenses, money.
Penny pinching.
Yeah, penny pinching, which that approach is ultimately going to kill any level of growth and confidence, and that'll infiltrate through your business, the people around you, your customers. So I think if you can have a mindset on growth and think about how can I create more, not how can I spend less, that will serve you well.
That's a good one.
But then, there does need to be a level of fiscal financial management as well in any organization, in any startup. So using company funds well, not irresponsibly. I think if we had a little bit less, avo on toast and a little bit less lattes on a daily basis, and we didn't wear as many designer clothes, I think also that would hold us in good stead, because, I can remember in the early days of my journey, when I lived in a car, I was 16, 17 years old. I had $20 in my bank account, and when I was starting my journey, I would have, I'd drink instant coffee. I'd eat loaves of bread with Devon, and tomato sauce.
Don't knock Devon and tomato sauce.
And I don't know if I see people, in today's world being prepared to make those sacrifices. Yeah. So is it that people are struggling, or they just need to make some lifestyle adjustments and lifestyle changes? I would encourage people to have a look at that. Stop trying to look successful and focus on actually becoming successful is what I would say.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well. We've got a couple of clients in the property space, buyers agents, some educators as well, and the interesting thing around the interest rates right now, which I think is a big cause of stress and cash flow issues in a lot of households, is that I think a lot of people have been over leveraged. They have been living outside of their means. And the one thing to note that a lot of people don't realize is that the interest rate is actually below average of what it was over the past 30, 40 years. We're actually in a pretty comfortable position from an interest rate point of view.
Yeah.
It's just, we've just had that rapid increase that I think the younger generation hasn't been exposed to, but I think the older generation will know that this level of interest rate is pretty normal. We've just had it really good, and therefore people have expected to live probably unrealistic lifestyle over the past 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, of course. And you said it before, business was never meant to be easy.
No.
And I think through, say, 2018, 2019, 2020, we've had a really good economy, and we've been in a good space.
So
and interest rates were cut, and people were starting businesses and they were blowing up, and almost anyone could open something and it would work.
So true.
And I think now we're in an economy where it requires skill and discipline and execution and focus and really studying a market and understanding a market. And I quite enjoy that environment, because it's, for me, it's what business is. It's a game for me. It's what I obsess over. And I like that in these economic environments that you can, I guess, play that game and use those skills, not just rely on the kind of macroeconomics to lift you up if the economy is good.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's an important part. And yeah, we've almost had like a bit of a unrealistic play at business, you know, and now it's becoming a bit more reality. There's a big reality check going on, which is filtering away those that aren't, that just don't want to go that extra mile, you know?
Of course. And look, on a more lighter note, I would also say to your audience, like, hang in there, because it will turn.
Yes.
It always does.
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, there's always doom and gloom and things aren't going to work and the economy's bad and interest rates are going to keep going up. It will turn. It always turns. Where there is dark, there will become light. Where there's light, there will be dark. Good times, bad times, things shift. So don't just make decisions on the current circumstance or the current environment. Make decisions as well for what it will be in the future. That's important.
If you truly believe in what you're doing and you're aligned to that vision, where there's a will, there's a way.
And, you know, you can list any amount of companies that started during a recession. You know, so
that's true.
Don't always think that it's great companies have to start when times are good.
That's 100%. Mate, you speak a lot of wisdom. I'm sure we could talk all day, but I won't hold you any longer. I'll get you back to your busy schedule. It's been awesome catching up. Pumped that you're healthy and well, and that you're looking really fit. So keen to get out and do some healthy stuff with you.
Yeah, good. And mate, well done on your success as well. I love watching you grow and what you're doing with GMS, and you know, you're one of the true players that I believe that is a stayer, and you believe in what you're doing, and you add lots of values to businesses. And for an agency to be around for 7-8 years, I think is not that common. So stay the course, stay the journey. I have a really good kind of read on where you guys are going to end up in the next 3 to 5.
I appreciate that, and likewise with Little Zach's. And mate, I'm looking forward to the book launch for the Everest climb and the sailing around the world.
Good. And if you do pump out a couple of children, mate, then you know where they're going to come.
I'll keep you posted for
Thanks,
sure.
Mate.
Cheers.